Thanks for tuning into a special From the Stacks Star Wars themed episode of How's Things, the podcast and radio show from the David A. Howe Public Library right here in Wellsville, New York. I'm Nick Gunning. Today my guest is Amanda Smith, the finance and acquisition specialist here at the David A. Howe Public Library, who's just a hair's breadth away from hitting her 10-year mark here at the library. Amanda, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. It occurs to me as we're sitting here, you've been on the show multiple times at this point, but once we were recording up in the museum room, the Teen Loft now.
Right.
Twice was quarantine.
Right.
And here we are. This is the first time we're actually using the official podcasting equipment together in my office.
In-house.
What a magical experience this is. How's it going? How are you? How's your Star Wars life lately?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I am revisiting the Star Wars Clone Wars series.
Oh, okay.
That's entirely on Disney Plus if you have it, which is
Okay.
great. I've not watched the latest update with the newest season
Yeah.
yet, but I'm going back through just to catch back up to
Okay.
anything that I've missed and
All right.
revisit all of that, which is
All right. A good revisit so far?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay.
I enjoy it.
All right. Before we dive into our full slate of Star Wars topics, let's still do a little bit of bookmark here on this special episode. So Amanda, what have you been reading non-Star Wars? We can talk non-Star Wars for this segment of the podcast. Anything interesting you finished that you want to share?
Non-Star Wars. I'm in the middle of a series at the moment by David Baldacci.
Oh.
It doesn't have like a series name per
Okay.
se, but the first one is the Target?
Okay.
And then the next one is The Hit, which is the second one that I just finished.
So who's the main character in that?
It's Will Roby.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't read those.
He's like a CIA operative.
Yeah.
And in the first one, he kind of has to go off grid because there's this kid that he finds
Okay.
that's in trouble and interlinks with his ongoing case. But of course, there's a mole in the CIA
Oh,
itself.
yes.
So,
Okay.
plot thickens.
Yeah.
Teams up with the FBI to
Uh-huh.
try and overtake everything and figure things out. Similarly with the second one, except it's a CIA operative who is targeted.
Okay.
And she's actually not really the bad guy.
Oh,
Spoiler alert.
wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
But it's an interesting series. And then I have also been reading the Artemis Fowl series.
Oh, okay. My brother loved those. I don't even know what it is. Like, I mean, I know that the books exist, but I don't know anything about the story.
Right. So Artemis Fowl is like this genius mastermind, and he's also a criminal,
Oh,
interestingly enough.
okay.
And so it depends on whether you're going by the movie or the book
Okay.
series. I haven't read the whole series, so I can't tell you everything about it.
Okay.
But essentially, he's exploiting fairies to try and get their technology and their... I know.
This is not where okay. All right.
It's an interesting crossover
It's-
between
yeah.
realism and fantasy
I'll
at the
say.
same time.
Sure.
So it's an interesting mesh between the two.
Yeah.
And the movie's interesting as well, but it's clear that they try and combine elements of different books
Okay.
and just kind of blend it all together in a few hours. And I think one of the things that they struggled with was how do we depict a criminal mastermind in a 12-year-old
Yes.
and make it appealing to children and so that parents
Right.
aren't like, yeah, we don't want you to watch this.
Yeah, well, because then you kind of run into like a Doogie Howser syndrome, right? Where it's like, how do you take this seriously? So that must
Right.
be another sort of step of.
Right. It adds an interesting element.
And I apologize for that dated reference of Doogie Howser, but it's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, it's done by Kenneth Branagh, which is,
Oh, that's right.
yeah, I enjoy his work a
Yeah.
lot. So
Yeah.
cinematography-wise, it's very interesting.
You know, we just watched Murder on the Orient Express for the first time. I'd never
Oh, the
seen
new
it.
one? I have
so,
not
I mean, it
seen the
looks
new one.
great. It looks great. I
Yeah.
found the movie a little dull, if I'm being honest,
Oh.
but visually, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, visually, he's always really good.
Yeah, I agree.
Having
yeah.
that kind of mindset.
Okay, so this is the first time you're reading Artemis Fowl.
Yeah.
Was
I've
it the
read
movie that encouraged you to read it, or you
no,
just?
I started.
Okay.
I started with the first book, read the second book, and then decided I would also watch the movie just to see what kind of comparison it was, because I
Okay.
thought it would just be the movie was based on the first book, but I saw elements of the first two books.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which was
All right.
interesting.
Yeah.
Which was cool.
All right. Well, my brother's always recommending those, so maybe I'll actually have to check it out one of these days.
Yeah. Books are better than the movie.
That's usually the case.
It's
There's
true.
some rare exceptions, but yeah.
True.
All right. So I've read a few things just like on the fly. I did a little vacation, a little weekend getaway with just my son, he and I. And so we got some things to do over there. He got a big Lego set. I checked out a Western from the library called Lawless Prairie by Charles G. West.
Nice.
It was just a quick little paperback, and it was, it explored a lot of the regular tropes. He's an outlaw with a heart of gold, But But it was fun, and I did, it was perfect for what I wanted, to just kind of sit down and plow through it over the course of a couple of evenings while Legos were happening. So
There you go.
good times. We did a whole Western episode, Eric and I, early on the All the Book Show, episode 35, All the Books Goes West, where we talked about some of our favorite Westerns, and we had made the mistake of watching The Ridiculous Six, the Adam Sandler movie on Netflix.
Oh, no.
Oh, my gosh. It left scars. It left scars.
I'm sure it did.
Also, and things that I really should know better, but did anyway, I read Revenge by James Patterson and Andrew Holmes. So I didn't. You read James Patterson?
I read some of his stuff.
Patterson?
Yeah.
Okay. You usually know what you're going to get here, and that was true for this one. I didn't realize until I started reading this that this character, David Shelley, actually started in one of Patterson's book shots. Do you remember that?
Oh.
Failed experiment where we got
Yes.
3 little paperbacks every week? It was crazy.
Yes.
There was one called Hunted that was by Patterson and Andrew Holmes that introduced this character of David Shelley. And actually, we did a Patterson episode 102, James Patterson at Last, and we decided we were all going to read a book shot. It was Eric and me and my brother Steven, and we read Hunted by James Patterson, and it broke all of our brains, And so as soon as I was like, oh my gosh, this is that same dumb character.
I know this character.
Yes. And this one also could have been a book shot. It was a full-length novel, but there was not enough content for it. So it was just like, okay.
Painful
all right,
getting through it then.
let's wrap it up. Yeah, I didn't enjoy it. And usually when I'm in the right mood, I can sort of turn my brain off and just sail through a James Patterson and be like, well, that was stupid, but fun. This one stopped at stupid. Never quite
Never
crested.
reached the fun.
Yeah.
point. That's unfortunate.
Yes, I know. Currently, I've got 2 on the list here. I picked up A House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Mallerman. The only thing I've read by him is Bird Box. Have you read or seen the movie Bird Box?
I have not. I've seen trailers and stuff for the movie itself, but haven't read the book. Haven't seen the movie.
So I've never seen the movie, actually.
Interesting concept.
I've only read the book, and it
Okay.
works pretty well. It's one of those things where you have to just sort of like, all right, I accept the premise, and then
Right, and then go with it.
keep going. And
Suspend reality.
That's been true of House at the Bottom of the Lake so far. It's really just about a couple of teenagers who find a house.
I read the trailer
at the bottom of the lake.
The blurb of this book and thought it was a very
And
strange concept.
I'm very intrigued so far, so we'll see how that plays out. The other one that I've been anticipating is the new John Grisham book, Soule, which is about
the basketball player.
Yeah. And so he wrote a baseball one several years ago now called Calico Joe, which I'd always intended to read and never actually did. The other sports book of his, Playing for Pizza, is about an NFL player who's kind of washed out of the leagues and goes and plays football in Italy. That's actually really good.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about Soule, and that's sort of next on my list. So
it's definitely a break from his normal
it is.
law
Yeah.
kind of vein that he travels in.
Yeah. So this is like the third of his little sports trilogy, I guess.
I like
we'll
that
see
he
where
branches
he
out
goes.
like that, though. It's very atypical.
Yeah, he's
but-
got some weird, like A Painted House is another one that's just like historical fiction. It's not a lawyer thing. He's got a nonfiction. He's got short stories and children's books as well, like Junior.
That's true.
The Theodore
yeah.
Boone series there. You know what? We did a whole John Grisham episode on the All the Book Show as well. So go to soundcloud.com/allthebooks or anywhere you get your podcasts and find some of that magic. That was an early up. The reason why we're here today is because it's May 4th. And that is Star Wars Day.
That's true.
So do you have your Star Wars Day decorations up, Amanda?
I don't, but I have Star Wars T-shirts that I could don tomorrow,
Yep.
so that'll be fine.
That's fair. That's fair. I do have my Darth Vader mug that our old pal Katura Capadonia got me several years ago. So I feel like I'm in a celebratory mood. Amanda and I chose some books to read today. Actually, we chose one book and weren't really liking it, so we chose a backup graphic novel so we didn't have to do a whole episode about a book we don't like, which I think is what we did last time with that Alan Dean Foster.
No, I think we just read that one book,
Yeah.
but then we talked about different Star Wars.
True. I don't
that we've
remember
read
where
and
you
things.
landed on that. It was The Approaching Storm.
It was kind of meh.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I liked it better the first time that I read it when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But now having more books under my belt,
Mhm.
like this is taking forever to get into. It was mostly just political.
Yeah.
Back and forth, not your typical. Oh, we're having a lightsaber battle.
That's
Oh,
right. It's
we're
coming
dealing
back
with
to me
this.
now. Yeah, that's one where it's like you felt like you were missing like the action half of it. It was very
There was so much
plotting,
travel,
I
so
thought.
much
Yeah, it was
political
just
aspects.
like Anyway, I'm not sure that we did much better this year, but the book we're going to be talking about is Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. So let's go ahead and do that. I have a few other Star Wars questions that I want to ask you, but let's talk Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. So this is it's the first of the adult books in the new High Republic line that they're doing. So they're doing junior level books, they're doing YA, they're doing comics and graphic novels, and of course adult fiction here. And Light of the Jedi was kind of the launching point for the adult books anyway. So I'm going to read you the publisher's synopsis. Are you ready, Amanda?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay. Long before the First Order, before the Empire, before the Clone Wars, Jedi lit the way for the galaxy in the High Republic. It is a golden age. And Trip, you got to picture this as a scrawl.
Right.
Would you like me to lean backwards?
I think we needed the opening Star Wars theme music, honestly.
I'll lean backwards and slowly walk away from you as I read this. It is a golden age. Intrepid hyperspace scouts expand the reach of the Republic to the farthest stars. Worlds flourish under the benevolent leadership of the Senate, and peace reigns, enforced by the wisdom and strength of the renowned order of Force users known as the Jedi. With the Jedi at the height of their power, the free citizens of the galaxy are confident in their ability to weather any storm. But even the brightest light can cast a shadow, and some storms defy any preparation. There's more, so just hold on. Just buckle up. When a shocking catastrophe in hyperspace tears a ship to pieces, the flurry of shrapnel emerging from the disaster threatens an entire system.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which I would argue makes exactly no sense.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll save it. No sooner does the call for help go out than the Jedi race to the scene. The scope of the emergence, however, is enough to push even Jedi to their limit. As the sky breaks open and destruction rains down upon the peaceful alliance they helped to build, the Jedi must trust in the Force to see them through a day in which a single mistake could cost billions of lives. Even as the Jedi battle valiantly against calamity, something truly deadly grows beyond the boundary of the Republic. The hyperspace disaster is far more sinister than the Jedi could ever suspect. A threat hides in the darkness, far from the light of the age, and harbors a secret that could strike fear into even a Jedi's heart. Fear is the path to the dark side, though.
This is true.
Don't you think that's problematic?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to try to avoid spoilers in this. Is it a spoiler to say that this was so boring? Do you think?
No.
All right.
I mean, we talked about it a little bit
We
before, and I was referencing Mockingjay. Like,
Yeah.
part one of Mockingjay
Yeah.
was just, I'm sorry, really boring.
Yeah.
Because there was the movie, the book itself is fine.
Yeah.
But part one of the movie Mockingjay, it takes so long, and
Yes.
it's just setting the stage for
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
And this sort of felt like that. You were reading through, and you were like, wait,
agree.
there's a billion characters here, and I
my
can't remember their names.
Yes. So for setup, and it's kind of in the synopsis here, but there is this big catastrophe, and that's how you start. And I actually thought, okay, this is a cool way to start a book, because you have a clock at the top. It's like, 80 minutes till whatever it is. Till impact,
like that.
And each chapter gets like closer and closer and closer.
And you're like, what's happening?
Yes, and you'd think that would sort of build anticipation, but like, I mean, you said it. It's just every chapter introduces
15 new characters.
Yeah. And I don't even know.
Keep track of them.
I honestly don't know if that's an exaggeration. You know what I mean?
So true.
Maybe we could kindly say each chapter introduces 5 to 7. That's what it feels like.
But it's so many all at once. You're just like, where am I?
I would
Who are
say
these
that
people?
this is impossible to follow.
Yes, it was very hard.
And this is one where I read it and I instantly looked for the reviews, and specifically we're seeking out reviews of people who agreed with me. But what I found is that it is pretty split. There's a lot of people who are like, this is an amazing setup for a new era. And a lot of people who are like, what? Because often in a book like this, you'll at least have a cast of characters at the beginning. You don't get that here.
Right.
And
they've done this for numerous Star Wars books before, because there are a lot of characters.
And
you
there's
have to keep track
no
of.
more that could have needed this
than
this. Because truly, I mean, when you look at Wikipedia or something like that, and it lists the characters, it's endless. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And I don't know who's...
I put the book down for a week and then picked it back up again, and I remembered maybe 2 characters.
Yeah.
And so every chapter, though, switches between different places.
Different pairings.
Planets,
Yeah.
different people.
Yep.
Different scenarios that are playing out and everything. And you're just like, where?
Yeah.
Who are these people?
And
I
it's
forget.
not I've read books like that have 1 million characters, but it does something to kind of anchor each character. And I don't think this book does that.
No, it sort of felt all over the place.
It's not even a thumbnail sketch. It's just kind of name, position, and then they do this thing, and then we move on. Name, position.
Very true.
And there's no way... Even the names themselves, I don't think are particularly
catchy.
No. And so I
remember 3 characters particularly.
Yeah.
I thought the main character, particularly because the cover of the book has just this range of Jedi in the front.
Yeah.
With a woman as a focal point.
Yeah.
And the one Jedi that they focus on a little bit towards the beginning is Avar Kriss.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, she's our main character. We'll focus on her. She's our anchor point.
Yeah.
But then again, like we said, it just kind of spans out from there, and you're wondering, wait, where are we?
It's
hard.
It is. And I've read, so before this, I actually read one called Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. And that's the junior level one. We read that in a book club that I do with some friends. And we read it primarily because I like that author. Like we had her on the show last year, episode 240, talking about her Deathless Divide book and the Lando book she was writing. But she gave us a little tease about this series. And I think looking back on that interview, and we've called back to this many times, but she made the point of saying that this really was like a big writer's room kind of process where all these books are kind of happening together and they're making sure they're staying tight with continuity and they're making sure that the characters are consistent from one to the next. When she was laying that out, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That's such a good idea, because that was something that I feel like the old expanded universe did pretty well with.
Yeah.
But with a more loose construct, it was like things would carry over, but it wasn't necessarily like
hard and fast.
Yeah. It was kind of like it would nothing you'd read in the old expanded universe, and there are exceptions, but for the most part, nothing would be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense because of the in the courtship of Princess Leia. There was nothing really like that. It was relatively smooth, and so I thought, well, good. I'm glad they're being proactive about this new wave here.
So was there interweave between the Justina Ireland book and this one?
There was some, because that also is kind of dealing with the follow. I think maybe, and I didn't really think about this until I was in here, but I think they're sort of dealing with a crashed ship, and I think that book is maybe in the aftermath of this one.
Okay.
But it wasn't really like I didn't feel lost reading that other one. It was just kind of like a crashed ship. I understand what that means. I don't need to have read this book, so that was fine. But I think maybe instead of making sure, just having like making sure we're consistent, what's happening is this format is really hamstringing these books and making it so it's like, oh, can you mention this character? They're kind of doing
so that we can build from there in later books and everything.
And it kind of feels like they're doing a reverse Avengers situation.
Oh, as opposed to like origin story and then bring them all together.
Like you said, who's the character you thought we were following?
Avar Kriss.
Yes. If this would have been about that character, or if it would have been about like Belle or one of the others, and that would have been like the primary character, and we get sprinklings of other characters.
We could have expanded from there.
Yes.
Yeah, and that would have been easier to follow.
But instead, this just becomes like a homework assignment.
Explosion, characters, here
like
you go.
You need to be reading this and underlining the characters' names and making your own sketch to have any hope of following it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I feel like if they would have done the exact reverse of that, been building towards some like major crossover event, use this big disaster in space as your like Avengers moment where you can bring all these characters together.
Right.
Okay. But to start by giving you, I don't even know, 40, 50 characters?
Something like that.
I just don't, for me, this just didn't work at all. I found this book a chore to read.
I thought it was difficult, but I do feel like towards the end there was some hope because I was following some. I feel like there was actually more focus.
It tightens,
towards the end.
Yes, it tightens a little in part two. Like once you kind of get over the calamity, when you're dealing with more the political, the what is that, the Chancellor, or what do they call that character?
Yeah, she's the Chancellor.
Okay, yeah. When you're kind of following her and dealing with the aftermath, and then we're sort of introducing some villains, then I think it gets a little bit more manageable. But by then, you're, hundreds of pages into this book, and you just sort of are like...
So as a new reader, you would really need to just buckle down and be like, okay, just get through like the first several 150 pages, and then it will maybe start making sense, hopefully.
Yeah. But even then, I don't think the characters from the beginning ever really crystallize, at least not for me.
Yeah, it's hard. And you don't see a lot of character growth in a lot of ways just because, maybe with the character Belle.
Yeah,
but
okay.
At the same time, though, because there are so many characters, it's not like the author has the opportunity to say, let's grow this character in these ways.
Yeah.
You just kind of get tidbits of information as you go, and then you're like, who are these people?
Yeah.
I don't really know them very well.
Yeah. Well, that's just what I mean about like a reverse Avengers, like take something like the Thor movie where you have Hawkeye in there for like a minute,
Right.
you know, but he's like, he was cool. He made an impact. He's in and he's out. But like, you're kind of waiting for that character to come back.
Right. And you know
I
nothing
think
about
they
him.
absolutely could have followed a similar pattern like this.
Definitely.
Let Belle be our like window in, and she bumps into these other people. She interacts with these other people. And those are things that can kind of stick in your head. So when you're reading a book about that character, you could be like, oh, right.
I remember them.
But instead, it's just like, I don't know. It's like when you're a kid and you have like a big tub of action figures and you just dump them out. That's what this book felt like to me.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have many positive things to say.
I mean, to be honest, I am kind of interested to see what the second book will look like.
Okay.
I think I will tread in that direction and see if maybe there's more of a focal point.
Yeah.
Do you know if it's going to be done? Because I know that in the extended universe, especially towards when they were ending, there was kind of this crossover point where one author did one did the next, and it was like a series kind of jump around.
I don't really know. I
Okay.
think it's looser than a series. I think it's more like an umbrella. Like this is the time frame in which we're working.
Okay.
You know. I will say, I guess the villains, the hill. How did you say that?
Yeah. I said the Nihil.
Okay, we'll
but-
go with that.
Well, that's fine either way.
I think they have promise
Yeah.
as villains.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the fact that they can kind of hold their own against the Jedi and without spoiling some things, they've got some advantages.
Right.
You know, and how they're able to
And you did see
maneuver.
character growth, particularly with the worst villain.
Yes,
there.
I think that was the most character growth.
Yes, you
Yeah.
see a drastic change in his position
Yeah.
and just his growth, and you get to see his evilness
Yes.
a lot more clearly.
Yeah.
And kind of like, oh, he's had this developing plan all along, as opposed
Yeah.
to, I think I'll do this.
I guess I mean it just keeps coming back to criticisms, but I just feel like the reason why you start a book the way you did is to give it like a big action and a drive to kind of ease you in to the slower, more political, more conversational second half.
Right.
But I think that only works if you're given some characters.
Right.
You know? So instead it was just like a cacophony, you know, that didn't
Right.
really, I don't know.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was just a jarring noise, like you
Yeah.
said, with the cacophony.
Yeah. And there's a bit of a disconnect. I mean, it wouldn't work entirely, but I almost feel like you could lop off the first and be like, there was a big catastrophe,
Yes.
and then start, you know?
Right. And the Jedi helped solve
You're
this
right.
catastrophe.
Yeah.
And here's our characters and moving on.
One thing that bothered me about Test of Courage was that this is supposed to be a long, long time before even the prequels.
Right.
And yet the world feels exactly the same. Like the
It
kind
does.
of technology that they're using, the way society functions, really doesn't feel different.
I think the only difference that I noticed in particular was this concept of looking at hyperspace. And
Yes.
it was almost like they had only just stumbled upon or figured out
Yes.
how to maneuver through it. And then with this collision in space, in hyperspace and
Mm-hmm.
everything, there's the question of, oh, well, is there something wrong? Do we need to shut down the
Yeah.
lanes? How are we going to deal with this, et cetera, et cetera?
I do think this one was a little bit better in that regard, setting aside or making you realize this is a different time
Right.
than Test of Courage was. But I still would have liked a little more.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get a lot of information about what their ship capability is. Actually, I mean, in particular with the Jedi Vector ships,
Yeah.
it almost seems like, I mean, it is the High Order, to be
Yeah.
honest, so they have a lot more ability with Force and stuff, but it almost seems like they're far more advanced than they were
Yeah.
at the prequel stage
Yeah.
when the Jedi Order was still doing really well.
And there were some things about the way the Jedi interacted with the Force that was different in this, which was interesting. Like the way there was a character who viewed the Force like musically.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember that? And I
Yeah,
thought
or
that
some
was
were
cool.
like waves. And,
Yes.
Yeah, they each had their own perception of it in certain different ways.
Yeah, so I
which
got to
was-
give it props there that was at least a different thing to explore.
Right.
Though I feel like they've done that a little bit with like Mace Windu or something in some of the expanded universe that had come before. But
Yeah, that's
regardless, that was an interesting aspect that I did enjoy and would have liked more of it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it would have been interesting to tease that out just to see how each of them perceived it somewhat differently.
I think it's really hard to launch a series without a protagonist.
Ugh, yes.
I really do.
Without a very
I
clear.
just don't. I don't know who I'm following at this point. Just like the whole world. I think that's probably the concept. You're just following the whole world, and I
Yeah.
just don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
To be honest, I was just thinking about it. I was like, well, who's the protagonist of our story if you had to narrow it down? And almost in some ways, it just feels like the galaxy. Is the
Right? It is.
protagonist.
Yeah, I think it is.
So I feel like in some ways you get a really good concept of, what was it, Chancellor Lowe? Is that
Yeah,
her name?
yeah.
Of what her the massive weight that she carries in terms of her job and everything of trying to make sure that the galaxy stays together. And I was like, whew, I would not want her position.
No, I know. Yeah, so she does get some play. The main villain gets some play. I guess out of the Jedi, I would have to give it to Belle as the most prominent character.
Yeah.
But even so, she feels like a side character.
Yeah,
So
he does.
Yeah, I know Charles Soule primarily as a comic book author. I know I've read some of his X-Men as well as some of his Superman and Wonder Woman, and I typically like his stuff. For Star Wars, specifically in the comic book world, he wrote the whole Poe Dameron series.
Oh, okay.
And I enjoyed that series, but it's one of those situations where, again, you can kind of feel that the author's handcuffed to whatever continuity is coming in the next movies.
That's true.
So it's like Poe's not really able to grow as a character in that series because you need him to be wherever the movies need him. So that's
true. Yeah, I feel like it would be hard for an author in some ways to work in that construct.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be freeing in some ways because you're not overwhelmed by, I have so many options.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're accustomed to working in that vein of everything's open, everything's on the table, then you're chained, like you said, to just whatever the movie producers and everything say as a go.
Yeah, and I think that's why sometimes working on things that are already established, like Sewell also did a standalone Lando, which was decent, but I think if I was going to recommend Charles Sewell's Star Wars, it would be his Obi-Wan and Anakin graphic novel.
Okay.
Because of course, those characters have been very, very richly mined.
This is true.
But he does sort of almost like a steampunk story with the two of them, and I just thought it worked really well.
Oh, interesting.
So if you're going to read a Charles Sewell Star Wars, that's where I would suggest you go. It's really hard to say without knowing where the series is going to go, whether or not this is required reading or even recommended reading. I can tell you as a reader and as a Star Wars fan, I did not enjoy it. But there's a lot of people who absolutely loved it and see something in here that I'm missing. So I guess I would take more of a wait and see kind of approach. See what comes next, and if it really seems like, okay, you definitely have to read this.
Y'all are gonna have to chime in and let us know.
Yeah, especially. Absolutely. Yeah, I need some guidance there. What do you think? Would you recommend it?
I don't know as it would be a book that I would recommend, especially if someone is just entering the Star Wars universe. Mm-hmm. It is not a good way to start, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it's too cumbersome and too difficult to follow.
Yeah.
But if you're into the Star Wars universe and you're already following it and you're willing to put in the time and effort and you want to expand your horizons, again, it's kind of a wait and see at this point as to say, oh, yes, definitely. Just get past the first book and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I can't say as I would recommend it.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that it's sort of a situation like, to use a Star Trek parallel, the first Star Trek movie is, it's very long. There's a lot of shots of the Enterprise, I like it as a Star Trek fan, like in hindsight, but I would never be like, oh, you've never seen Star Trek? Watch the motion picture. Never. But The Wrath of Khan, which kind of is almost like a fresh start, goes forward and kind of sets the tone. Possibly that's what we'll have here with the High Republic. They've got this first slate of books, and then they're going to sort of be like, okay, here's what we need to do and sort of figure it out going forward. I'm optimistic that will happen.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens here. Before we dive into our graphic novel, though, I wanted to ask you a question that I did not prepare you for.
All right.
And that is, since the last time we talked, what are some Star Wars things that you have either read or watched and enjoyed?
Oh, let's see.
So just within the past year. I can tell you mine while you think, if that's helpful.
I did watch the entire season of Mandalorian.
Let's do it.
Which was great.
Okay.
I loved it. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the departure from the standard, we're going to focus on the Jedi and that aspect of Star Wars and everything, and we're actually going to focus on Mandalorians. And I thought it was an interesting break, too, with where Clone Wars had brought in Mandalorians, because they had depicted Mandalorians as kind of like a peace-loving society, whereas the extended universe had taken a completely different tack and said they're mercenaries.
Right.
They're for hire.
Yeah.
They'll kill whoever's on their list, and it's totally fine.
Well, that's sort of a thing of old Star Wars, though, isn't it? I mean, right down to the planets. It's like Hoth is all ice and snow, or Tatooine is all sand. Like, that doesn't make sense, And it's sort of true with characters, too. It's like, well, Boba Fett was a bounty hunter, so all Mandalorians must be,
exactly
ruthless bounty hunters.
Yes.
It's kind of
that's true.
Painting with a broad brush there, but
it was a very kind of it felt very Western in a lot of ways.
For sure.
And even with the music and stuff, and the way that they had depicted it felt very Western.
Clearly tapping into that, spaghetti Western kind of Clint Eastwood, fistful of dollars kind of vibe.
Yes, but not in a cheesy way. It was it was a nice nod, but still with that same sci-fi focus.
Yeah. I started The Mandalorian, and I don't know, we maybe watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, and we didn't, like, my wife and I were both kind of like, yeah, okay. We weren't like swept up in it right away.
Right.
We were just kind of like, okay, that's fun. And then we went for a long batch where we just didn't check back into it. And then we did, and I feel like that, maybe it's the 3rd or 4th episode, but it really kind of takes off. And then it was like as soon as it came out, we had to watch it, which
Right.
is not unique. I feel like
Right.
that's a pretty common thing. But yes, I feel like The Mandalorian revitalized Star Wars in a very unique way that I don't think the new movies were able to do.
I agree.
Though I will say, Force Awakens was very exciting for me. I think people have maybe soured on that movie a little bit, and it's kind of hard. I mean, I feel like Last Jedi is a movie that's really almost impossible to do a sequel to,
Yes.
because it kind of cuts off all avenues of story, at least for like the saga that was being told. And so Rise of Skywalker is problematic, but it's also like, what else do you do after The
Right.
Last Jedi?
Right.
You
and
know?
they packed so much into it too. It was
Yeah.
very clear that they were like, we need to wrap all of these loose ends up. This is how we're going to do
So
it.
I did feel that Star Wars excitement with The Force Awakens. I walked out of that movie very happy. Like, couldn't wait to see it again. But I feel like The Mandalorian was able to kind of revitalize it with a bit of a staying power that I don't think the new movies
I
have
agree.
really been able to do. So yes, I'm really glad that we checked back in and gave it a second chance, because we really were very, very heavily invested into it.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the last episode twist? Do you think it's been long enough?
I think so.
All
I
right,
think there's
so
enough
spoilers
time.
ahead.
Yes.
Spoilers, I can't stress this enough. If you're planning on watching The Mandalorian,
Mute.
yeah,
Turn
maybe
it off and come back in
just
5
give us a
minutes.
few minutes here. Yeah. Okay, so here we go.
Spoilers! Spoilers!
What did you think of the reveal at the end?
I was very excited at how they were leading up to it, and I
Yeah.
almost felt a little bit of disappointment. Believe it
yes.
or not.
No,
And
I do
felt,
believe it.
I felt badly that I was disappointed, but at the same time, I was like, I thought it would be someone else.
I know.
I was hoping it would be someone else.
I was hoping it would be someone else
because
too.
it was such a deviation
Yeah.
from like there was this overarching, oh, this is what's happening in the rebellion, this is what's happening in the empire.
Yeah.
But it was so far removed that you were like, oh, okay, I already know that storyline.
Yeah.
This is fine.
It was like, I think I felt both things at once, because it was really exciting to see that character come into that story, but it also is kind of like,
oh,
but-
you've tainted it somehow.
but can we not?
yes.
Like
Can we make it someone new?
there's so many other things going on, and I feel like having it be that character, that's not really a story you can explore.
Right.
You know what I mean? It
Because
kinda
we
feels
already
like-
know how that plays out.
Yeah, it feels like that story is done.
Yeah.
So
and it raises questions about, well, what happens to
well,
Baby
yeah,
Yoda
I
in
know,
that time
exactly.
period?
So there's a lot of characters that I was hoping it would be. So I really felt the shock and the excitement of the reveal. But from a storytelling standpoint, I do feel like it was a wrong move.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I mean, I appreciated the revelation of Ahsoka coming into play.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's cool.
That is
I
cool.
liked that.
yeah.
But with the newest character coming into play, I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
because I mean, even in extended universe, which I realize is no longer
Yeah.
a thing,
Yeah.
or with the Disneyfied version of Star Wars,
Yeah.
we already know how both play out.
Yeah.
And there's no mention
Yeah.
of any Baby Yoda whatsoever. And you're
Yeah.
like, so does he
It
become
just-
another Yoda?
I don't know. It sort of felt like an easy, like, crowd cheering moment,
yes.
but it just doesn't.
But it was just that. It was just a moment.
doesn't land story-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like once the initial, like, the shock and the excitement fade away, you're kind of like, oh,
Well, now what?
But wait, that sucks, actually.
Yes.
In hindsight. So,
So true.
yeah, mixed feelings on that.
So it was a
definitely.
very, very cool reveal. I love the way that they kind of had that mystery element to it, and they brought him in and whatnot, and it was just this really
Yeah,
cool force battle, lightsaber battle, etc.
It was. And it's funny because you see the ship, and you see the outfit and everything, and it's like,
I didn't think it was him at first. I was
well,
like,
yeah. And it's so obvious, and it goes on for so long that you think, okay, well, now this is a bait and switch. And then
Right.
when it's not, it's also kind of like, oh,
oh, I
okay.
did not expect that.
So why the 5 minutes of mystery there? But okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited about season 3, although I already miss Grogu.
Yes.
I don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm less interested in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, yeah. I have not not really been super
when
interested.
Disney did that drop of like, here's all the Star Wars shows coming, and it was just like a ticker tape of like this and this and this and this and this and this and this. I was like, maybe
Let's not overload.
Yeah, we don't want to have another like, you know, remember how many Star Wars movies were announced that they were like, no, forget it,
Oh, golly,
cut. So I don't know. I'm a little. I guess we can transition into animation here for a moment because I did binge the last season of Rebels.
Oh, you finally did.
I did over the weekend because we watched it way back when it started, and we were pretty current with seasons 1 and 2, and then season 3 for whatever reason we got kind of snagged on and weren't watching it as regularly. And then, you know, it was all on Disney Plus. We were like, oh, cool, we can watch it whenever we want, and then we just didn't.
Right. Okay. So again, spoilers ahead, people.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the ending, how they ended it and everything?
I there was a while there where I felt like we were a little bit adrift.
Okay.
You know, I love Thrawn back from the old Timothy Zahn trilogy.
Right,
I
same.
haven't really enjoyed much Thrawn since then. I feel like Thrawn is the kind of character where his whole reputation is that he's just brilliant and unbeatable.
Right.
When you have him in a situation where he's constantly like bested, it sort of takes away from that.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
I feel like that's a character that's maybe you use that character gingerly, or you run into the risk of him just being a buffoon.
Right.
And I think Rebels didn't always toe the right side of that line. You know, he definitely has some amazing moments as Thrawn in that, but there are also some times when I think like, so why does he have this reputation then?
If he's continually bested by the Jedi.
A little
Question mark.
ragtag group of rebels here.
I
But
think they would have run into the complication of being like, well, all right, are we going to make our villain far better than the Jedi are, or
Yeah.
are we ultimately going to let the good guys win?
right, yeah. I think maybe one way to accomplish that, and I think that's what kind of works about season 4, is that for a long time, Thrawn, like in season 3, is really the primary antagonist that they are dealing with like directly.
Right.
I think if Thrawn would have been a little bit more of like, you know, sort of the big bad, and he had like a lieutenant who was really
underlings.
the main place where they were interacting, that maybe would have made it a little bit better because there would have been that layer. But as it was like sometimes Thrawn was in the room with them, and it was like,
Right, and then he was bested by the.
Yes, it was like, be better,
look,
bro.
Pull the tapestry.
yeah.
We
So
win.
it's sort of like, but I love Rebels. I really
Right.
do. I mean, it's one of my favorite Star Wars properties out there.
I was determined not to like it at first.
Really?
Yes. Well,
So
it was
grumpy.
I know. It was sort of in protest because, you know, Disney had taken over Star Wars
Yeah.
and essentially eradicated the EU. And
Yes.
I was like, but I spent
yeah.
most of my
I'm
childhood,
with you.
adolescence reading a lot of those books, and now you're saying that they're no longer a thing. But then I watched the movie that they had made that was kind of leading into the show itself, and I watched it and I was like, oh man.
I know.
All right, fine. I like this.
You know, and I know there's criticisms of Rebels out there, and while we did get some legacy characters, you know, we see Obi-Wan and Yoda, we have a Leia episode, we have a Lando episode.
Right.
Those are things that are just sort of there as little like Easter eggs to enhance the plot of the Rebels.
Right.
They're never the Deus Ex
A
Machina.
focus.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're never the thing that's like, and now everything's saved because Leia's here. You know, it's
Right.
just sort of like,
It sort of seems like they were potentially doing with Mandalorian at the end.
yeah, a
Question mark.
little bit. But that's what I like about it. They don't. I feel like more than just about any other Star Wars property, Rebels stands on its own.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Which is very much appreciated.
it sprinkles in legacy characters just enough, you know, but
kind
it
of
never.
keep the old guard, if you will,
Yeah,
focused and
yeah.
appreciative.
But it never steals the show, and at the end of the day, it's up to our main characters to solve the
It's
problem.
like cameos.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
which I appreciated.
We don't have. I mean, it doesn't end with like, and now Han Solo's here. You know what I mean? Like
and he saves the day. Woo.
that doesn't happen. You know, it's really it's about Ezra and Kanan and Hera and
Yeah.
Sabine. I mean, that's the crew that gets you through. So yeah,
the ending was not my favorite, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
Well, so
Okay.
when they killed off.
Spoiler alert, we're gonna spoil it.
Yes. When they killed off,
Spoilers!
I did not believe he was dead.
I didn't either.
For like 2 or 3 episodes
Yeah.
after that, I was thinking he's been knocked unconscious,
Yeah.
can't access the Force for whatever reason. Ezra's in such
Yeah.
disarray that he can't sense him in the Force,
Yeah.
and somehow he's
Yeah.
gonna be fine. And then no.
Yep.
And I thought actually that there was another season after that,
Oh.
which I think is one of the reasons I was holding on to so much hope. I was
Okay.
like, oh, they have a whole other season to resolve this problem.
Yeah.
And then I think it was one of my brothers was like, "Oh no, this is the last season."
Yeah.
And I thought, "What? They've only got like 3 episodes
Yeah.
left. How are they going to work this out?"
Yeah.
And then of course they don't end up working it out, and it's obvious that he's gone, and
Yeah.
Spoilers!
just kind of vanishes
Yeah.
into space, and you're like,
See,
"What is happening?"
I like that though, because to me that feels very, I mean, there's Western elements to that, but it also is sort of plays into the original idea of Star Wars being like episodic serials, or like Clone Wars, where it's like you're not linear, you're kind of dropped in and this is what's happening in this moment. While Rebels was much more of a serialized story, the fact that it ends on that sort of like the adventure continues,
That's true.
for me really landed, but I get why it would be disappointing.
Well,
otherwise.
I'm always a happy endings person.
Okay.
So I had anticipated, okay, we'll end on a happy note, and instead of it's more of this kind of
Yeah.
dissonant waiting for closure
Yeah.
note.
I thought that because we start on Lothal, which is Ezra Bridger, who's a protagonist.
Right.
That's his home planet. And we kind of get away from that, and we gradually sort of refocus on that. To have the ending be about freeing that planet, I feel like was really clever of them.
It is nice in circular
Yes,
storytelling.
because, like,
it is great.
You can't have them destroy the Empire. You know what I mean? You can't have them do something that's going to
Happen in the
majorly
future.
yeah, affect, what's happening in the movies or whatever. So to give them a prize that's actually like very meaningful to the characters and for the narrative of the story, but doesn't affect like the greater thing, is really, I just think, a very clever writing, and
It
I
is
found
very
it
clever.
satisfying.
It is
So,
very clever, and I can totally see why they ended it in the ways that they did.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't, it becomes a question of,
Yeah.
well, when Luke comes along,
right,
why isn't one of them training
right,
him or
exactly,
something?
yeah.
Yeah, so it does raise questions, and I get that why in the
It
context of things they would
becomes
do
a little
that.
bit more adult than I expected.
That's true.
You know what I
There
mean?
are
Some of the
dark
themes that
elements
are covered, just death and romance, and there's lots of elements that I wouldn't have expected,
Yeah.
that I think play out really well. So yeah, if you haven't watched Rebels, I know we have some of it on DVD here. It's on Disney Plus. I highly recommend it. You?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. It's a very good series.
See, now
Very
we've
well
got Bad Batch is dropping today, and I feel like I'm can't really watch it because I haven't watched all of Clone Wars, so I'm kind of disappointed in that. That it's
Disney Plus.
I know.
Clone Wars,
I know,
Next
but
show.
like I want to watch it, and so the fact that it's like the exact same animation,
oh, yeah.
it's not really exciting for me in the way that I wanted it to be.
Did you ever watch? So Cartoon Network years ago had like a mini series that was of the Clone Wars. It
Yes.
was like what 5-10 minute episodes
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
that. And so it's very funny to go back and watch it now. Again, I think Disney Plus has it.
They
Again,
do. They just put out a whole vintage thing that includes the Ewok movies, the Ewok cartoon, that Clone Wars
Yeah,
like
yeah.
micro series, and the animated segment from the holiday special.
That's right. Yeah, I saw some of those. But the mini series itself, the animation is a bit different than what they do for Rebels and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Clone Wars. But the concept is quite different, especially in how they use the Force.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one episode in particular where Mace Windu jumps out of a gunship, lands in this very densely packed space with tons of super battle droids
Yeah.
and just regular battle droids, and he just like force waves his hand, and the whole lot of them just go flying backwards. And I'm thinking to myself, why did it take so long to win the Clone
Right,
Wars
yeah, maybe
again?
do that more.
Yeah.
I know. Well, that's always a problem, and that's true in Rebels too. Sometimes it's just like push the man off the bridge.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just
they're like, "No, can't.
give him a shove.
Not gonna do it."
Yeah, they're very selective about that.
They are. It's almost like they're
Yeah.
forgetful.
Yep, I have seen that. I remember when it was on, and actually, we do have that on DVD in the collection here as well. But yeah, I remember liking it, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen it since 2006 or
I
whenever
felt
that
like
was. so.
Anakin was at his whiniest. In
That could be. Though I really like Matt Lantner, who voices Anakin in the Clone Wars stuff
Oh, yeah.
that I've seen.
Yeah.
So I've seen like the movie. I saw the movie in theaters,
Okay.
and I'm pretty confident to say that I've seen the whole first season
Okay.
of Clone Wars, but I was never like super devoted to it. But now that Rebels is finished, I feel like,
There
well,
you
now
go.
I still kind of want to watch Star
There you
Wars,
go.
so maybe we'll go back and do it.
That's a good plan.
My
It-
wife, who is, she's a big Star Wars fan, always has been, but I was kind of surprised that once we finished Rebels, I look over and she's like on her phone being like, well, what happens? What happens next? Like she's trying to figure out like where the story continues. And I'm like,
Yes.
I don't think there is. And
I
she's like,
saw
there must
s-
be.
I saw some interview. I think it was with Dave Filoni, who did a lot of the writing and producing and stuff for that show.
Yeah.
And he he had made some comment about Rebels itself because, again, people had come to him and been like, well,
Yeah.
wait, you left things up in the
Yeah.
air. What's happening? And he essentially just kind of said, you got to trust me on this.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, again, that just leaves
Yeah.
you up in the air of,
What are you
well,
doing? I think that's
where are you
why
going?
anytime a cast is announced and there's not a name, like I remember in Last Jedi when Benicio del Toro was cast, everybody was like, oh, he's definitely playing Ezra. He's going to play a grown-up
yeah.
Ezra. And of course he didn't.
right?
And I think like there was also some speculation in The Mandalorian that maybe that was going to happen.
Right.
So,
Yeah, there has been a lot of speculation of his return
Yeah.
in some capacity,
Yeah.
but then we haven't seen anything
no,
yet.
no. So, but that just tells you.
He's been
it's
put into a vault for a period of time.
I guess so.
Until the right time.
I guess
Question
so.
mark.
So that's probably been my biggest. Those two shows have been my biggest Star Wars during the time. Book wise, the two I want to mention in this past year are the manga version of Claudia Gray's novel Leia, Princess of Alderaan. The book is decent. It falls into some YA tropes pretty heavily, but it does a good job of tying together events from the prequel series, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy.
Okay.
And it's been adapted to manga by Haruchi, and only the first volume's out now, but it's coming out of its hiatus, and another volume's going to come. I really enjoyed the first volume. I think whether you've read the book or not, the manga's really good. There's also a Rebels manga that's, I think, 2 volumes in so far.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I haven't read it, but book-wise, Poe Dameron Free Fall by Alex Segura. This is one that actually does serve to flesh out Rise of Skywalker a little bit. It's a YA. Get a little bit more on Poe, and it manages to do character development and have some stakes and still kind of fit within the confines of the movies. So I was
nice.
impressed by that. So those are the two that I would recommend. Any Star Wars books that you've read in the last year that you want to toss out here?
Would you believe I've been rather lax in my Star Wars books?
I
know.
won't believe it.
I'm shocked.
I refuse to accept it. All right, let's move on to the graphic novel. This is in the Legends canon, so the old school, early Marvel
Disbanded.
comics. Yep.
Done for.
We read Star Wars Legends Forever Crimson. This is by Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson. Okay, are you ready, Amanda?
I'm ready.
A Star Wars saga decades in the making. Meet the droid-hating Valance the Hunter, who's hot on the trail of Luke Skywalker. Will his destiny end by finding the rebel hero or in a deadly confrontation with Darth Vader? Then on a routine X-Wing patrol, Luke and his squadron find a derelict Imperial Star Destroyer with everyone on board dead, and their skin turned crimson. Very Star Trek-y, that plot,
It so
by the way.
is.
When the virus responsible leaves Luke in a coma, Han Solo and his allies face a race against time to cure the mysterious malady. Then, in the landmark Star Wars number 108, return at last to the classic Marvel galaxy of a long time ago, continuing the stories of Valance and the Crimson Forever. And you won't believe which characters return. Dun, dun, dun. I had a good time with this graphic novel. I'm going to tell you right up front.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
I did enjoy it, but you're right. It was very Star Trek-y.
Yeah, it was.
And there was very interestingly, there was one tidbit, there's one panel that said something like, they're going to warp. And
Yeah.
I was like, warp is not a thing in Star
I know.
Wars.
Yeah.
So that made me laugh a lot. But it was an interesting concept. And I kind of enjoyed the very 50s-esque graphics to it.
Yeah.
And even though at one point it did kind of adapt to more of a modernistic feel, it continued the same storyline. So, and it was interesting in concept, just this kind
It
of
was.
crimson fever that
Yeah.
takes over people.
Yeah, and I really like this stuff with Valance, just
Yeah.
this sort of like, it's kind of a classic trope of this character like coming to grips with his own humanity.
Right.
But I still thought it was fun, but it did have that vibe of, more like movie serials. Like, I mean, that's kind of the basis for, George Lucas's vision of Star Wars, but it definitely had shades of Star Trek and Buck Rogers and that sort of thing in it.
Very
so
episodic in a lot
just
of ways.
interesting to see the Star Wars world really before it's developed as tightly as it has at this point.
Right.
So yeah, this was fun. I haven't read a lot of the early Star Wars comics. I think I've read the movie adaptations and stuff, but
Right.
I don't think I've read a lot of the single issues or a lot of these collected arcs, but I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And it reminded me a little bit of like Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Yes.
That very early
Yeah,
book that
Alan
was
Dean
written.
Foster,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, bringing him back. But yeah, because there was so much freedom there to just sort
you
of
do whatever you want.
span out in any direction that you wanted to, bring in any characters that you wanted to, just make it up as you go. Which
Yeah.
they very much did in
Yeah.
that book, and they've kind of done in this particular series as well, which I
Yeah.
thought was very interesting.
It's a much more pulpy version of the characters, but I still think they're recognizable as the characters that you know.
Right.
You mentioned Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and I do love that book, which is clearly just kind of like out of left field.
Right, it is.
It's so
It
early
is.
in it. But there is a graphic novel adaptation of that, which is
Okay.
very cool. So if you've never read that, it is on Marvel Unlimited, and I think it's in print as well, but that's a lot of fun. And I also liked in this collection, we have a more modern comic where they sort of do a throwback issue where they bring back Valance and Crimson Forever and everything.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was neat to see them in a more modern style address some of these pretty goofy, like 70s plot lines.
Yes.
But no, I thought that was a lot of fun. And that was one that I would recommend that to a Star Wars fan. It's unusual.
It is
and that's
unusual,
always-
but it's a very quick read.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going through your side effect symptoms
Yes.
from your second COVID
Yep.
shot, you
Yes.
can definitely read it.
Oh,
at
is that what you
time.
did? That was your
yes,
thing?
that was my thing.
Yeah.
I was like just sitting on the couch doing this. This
Yeah.
is fine.
Yeah,
Oh, Crimson Fever.
That makes
It's very
perfect
fitting,
sense.
Yes.
You read that. I shivered in bed for hours and hours and hours. So,
I don't think my fever was as high
we
as
had a
yours.
little different.
You nearly
response
succumbed to the
there.
Crimson Fever.
I darn near did.
Did your
You're
eyes
not
turn
kidding.
red? Was
You're
Hillary
not-
really worried?
She was. Yeah. Yeah, it was rough, but I'm all vaxxed now.
So there you go.
So now this
I'm
is
wearing
like
a red shirt.
Oh yeah.
This is dangerous for Star Trek
I know,
people.
you're right. This is this has become a PA now about going out and get your vaccination.
This is it,
Amanda and
apparently.
I 2 shots in and we're both still on our feet. So
Yep, still kicking.
good news. Do you have any Star Wars plans for May the 4th? You gonna rewatch anything? You gonna
I have been thinking
in?
about restarting the movies actually. I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
going through chronologically and watching those again.
Chronologically,
Well,
that's your
wait,
jam?
I take it back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Watching them original 4, 5, and 6, and then
Okay.
1, 2, and 3,
Okay.
and then 7, 8, and 9.
I see.
Yes.
So when you do a rewatch, are you going to include like a Rogue One or a Solo or
No, I think not in this time around.
Okay.
It'll probably just be the standard
classics,
the
the
classic
numbers. Yeah.
storylines. Yeah.
yeah?
I did really appreciate Rogue One. That was very well done. But again, very sad in a lot
True,
of ways.
yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
just referencing Rebels in terms of, sorry, they had to die.
Yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, they would need to come into
Exactly,
the actual storylines
exactly.
of the other movies.
I had a good time with Solo.
Okay.
And I know that's like a minority opinion, but I just thought it was fun. It's
very
like, it doesn't try
interesting
to do
the
anything.
polarization on that. Like some
I
people
know.
like love it, and some people like
Yeah.
hate it. And typically, there's not much of a middle
I know.
ground.
Well, I was first in line of being like, don't do a Solo movie. That's so stupid.
Right. Why
And I
would you do
still,
this?
honestly, still feel like it was a dumb thing to do and a bad idea.
Right.
But I think the movie that we got out of it, to me, was just a fun adventure movie, and I was fine with that.
Right.
I think I don't know. Usually when we do a rewatch, we will watch the Clone Wars movie just because I much prefer that version of Anakin
Oh,
to
yeah.
the Hayden Christensen version.
Yeah.
But I think if we ever were to do it again, and we sort of like so far we've introduced our son who's 6 to Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, nice.
So maybe when we go through again, we'll include those. I could see doing that. I'm a completist,
I'm very interested to see, since we're talking Star Wars, what they
do it.
do with the Obi-Wan TV show that's
Right.
coming up.
I know. That was the thing that was like, everybody wanted it. Ewan
Right.
McGregor was up for it. It's
Right.
like, why has it
And
taken
he was
this
like
long?
promoting it himself. He was
Yeah.
like, I would love to
He's
do
like,
it.
I'll do
I
it.
want to
I'm
do
there.
I
Sign
love
me
Star
up.
Wars.
I don't know why you ever wait to do something like
Right.
that.
It's so true.
yeah,
And,
that is.
I've heard, not rumor, I think it's more official now that Hayden Christensen is
I think
coming
that
back
they've
as Darth
confirmed
Vader.
that. Yeah, that's
so I'm
crazy.
interested to see, especially with all the feedback that they've gotten about his ability to
True.
portray the character
Yeah.
or just what he had to work with, what they'll do to tweak that and
Yeah.
try and actually help develop his character
It would
more.
be really interesting if Hayden Christensen had sort of a redemption and got the chance to actually like
Right,
do a good
right.
job at Darth Vader. That's not something I'm going to hold my breath on, but I would like to see it.
Yes,
I
I
think
would
that
like,
would be worth
I'd like
it.
to see in full swing with his character
Yes.
since he was redeemed. Just
Yeah.
seeing the actor's ability to redeem the
I
character.
agree.
That
I
would be
agree.
that would be a nice full circle.
Well, I think we're gonna maybe watch the Bad Batch episodes from Clone Wars just so we can keep up with the new show, and
Okay.
probably go back and revisit Clone Wars too. But it's so non-linear. I feel like I'd be okay doing that. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that since you've already got some of the Clone Wars under
Yeah.
your belt, and of course you know the storyline,
Yeah.
I don't think it would be far outreaching to just start.
Yeah,
that
and of course, a
series.
lot of the Clone Wars characters do make some more than others, but do make an impact in Rebels. You see them
Right,
a lot. So
that's
there's a lot of
true.
characters I think that I am familiar with. But
That's
I'd like to keep up with the new show. I don't know that I want to like watch 7 seasons of Clone Wars in order to do that right
Right.
off the bat. But I think finishing Rebels has sort of given me the kick to actually like sit down and do Clone Wars, because I think it's just like gets universal praise.
Yeah.
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 And I think it was only just like at the time when it was on originally, I was like, what is this? How does this connect to the previous episode? It's hard to kind of reset your mind.
That's true.
For that, but I feel like now I could just kind of watch them each as one-offs or arcs, So
Yeah.
that's probably what we'll do. But I would like to catch up with at least the Bad Batch episode so that we can watch the new show. Any Star Wars books on your to-read list looking to the future?
Well, I mean, there is the second one from the High Republic series
Yeah.
that we talked about.
Yeah.
Because I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful.
And
that
Claudia
they will
Gray's
narrow in.
YA is out there, and
That's
that's
true.
She's pretty reliable.
That's true. That's true. I
Okay.
have not read, and this came out a few years ago. I've not read. I think it's just called Kenobi.
Oh, I've read that.
Yeah, I think Eric read it too, and he
Yeah.
had mentioned that he really liked it.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting to see just how they kind of take his character and
Yeah.
develop him on the world of Tatooine.
It's an
and
interesting
his
time. That was when we were divided on. Eric loved the book. It didn't really click for me.
Oh, okay.
But we do have it in the collection here, so you can check it out.
That's true.
Anytime. We have actually a pretty
We do
robust
have a
Star
really
Wars
nice
collection. So, yeah, if you're a fan, this is definitely the place to come.
I gotta say, I do geek out a little bit when I go downstairs to the sci-fi section.
Yeah.
And I just see
I know.
several rows worth of Star Wars books that we
Well,
have sitting there.
A couple of
very
times
nice.
we've gotten big batches of donations, and they're not widely held in the system. And
That's
I'm just
true.
like, I mean, they're
Put 'em in.
free. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, we might as well. So yeah, we do have quite a bit of expanded universe and things. I do this book club with some friends, and we alternate between Star Trek and Star Wars. And we've been talking about trying the new Jedi Order a little bit. None of us have ever read any of those books, like Vector Prime and
I have read
things
some
like
of
that.
those.
Have you?
Okay, so Vector Prime, I know that's the first one of the
It
new
is,
Jedi Order,
yeah.
and that one was very hard to get. I think again,
really? Darn.
they did some elements of like High Republic.
Oh,
and
where it's like, this is everything.
So many new characters. Well,
Mm.
because it introduces like this new enemy, and
Yeah,
all
that's
of them have
Yuzong
different
Vong
characters.
stuff,
yeah,
right?
Yuzong
Yeah,
Vong
okay.
and everything. So that's hard, but. To be honest, I think I read half of that and then I skipped ahead slightly.
Oh,
So and it was
that's
okay.
That's a good note.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a good note.
So just FYI, I mean, maybe at this point it would be easier to read it, but
Okay.
it is a good series. It's dark in a lot of ways.
That's what I
Darker,
hear.
feel like, than even just the Empire
Yeah.
were. And
Well,
it's an interesting.
It's funny. I've read a lot before and after, and everything after references it so heavily. It's just
Oh,
like,
it's true.
geez,
Yeah.
I need to at least get one of these under my belt.
Did you read the series just following the new Jedi Order?
I read the Dark Nest trilogy.
Nope, the one after that.
Oh, the
one
Fate of
where-
the Jedi.
Maybe that was it. I can't remember for sure.
I read-
Yeah, I think it was Fate of the Jedi.
That's
like
kind of about.
Jason...
Yes,
Yes.
I've read the first two.
Okay. All right, I won't spoil anything.
My
there.
brother loves those. That's like his favorite.
They're
Star
very
Wars.
well done.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with some of the choices they made with some of the
Oh,
characters.
interesting.
To
Okay.
be honest.
All right.
Oh, especially because like I don't know if you've read it or not. The Young Jedi Knight series.
I
So
have
when-
read several of those. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Jaina and Jason
Yeah.
end up going to the academy and everything,
Mhm.
learning their Jedi skills, etc.,
Mhm.
etc. So it actually harkens back to that the Fate of the Jedi series does in a lot of different ways, and it's like a pull at your heartstrings kind of thing.
Okay.
And just to see the vast change between some of the characters from that period to now.
Just inconsistent.
Yeah, well, some of them stay consistent throughout,
Okay.
but then some of them have drastic changes.
Oh,
that
that's a
occur.
pain.
And some of that is because of like the Yuzhan Vong era
Right.
and just all of the impact that had
Yeah.
on them. So, and it references a lot of ways what war can do
Yeah.
to a person over time and how it changes them or affects their mindset, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very interesting just to see that kind of transition from, oh, this is who they were, young and innocent,
Yeah.
to now, quote unquote, that period of time where they are in Fate of the Jedi.
Okay. Tough sell. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's very well written, though. They do a really good job.
My favorites of Star Wars novels, nothing has changed the ranking.
Oh,
So I will
still
just-
Timothy Zahn.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll just briefly tell you. I mean, for me, it's the Thrawn trilogy. There's a Jedi healer duology,
Oh,
Battle
yes.
Surgeons.
With Luminara,
I
Barriss.
absolutely love those.
Yep.
Those might edge out the Zahn trilogy for me. I think they're so good. They're so
very
unusual. I really like Republic Commando. I really like the Splinter of the Mind's Eye graphic novel.
Yep.
You get to see Leia with a lightsaber, which is my favorite.
Yeah, that's cool.
A.C. Crispin's Han Solo trilogy, the Corellian trilogy by Roger Allen McBride. I mean,
That
those
one's good.
are still the ones that always come to the top for me.
Same.
What about you? What are some of yours?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Jedi Academy trilogy that Zahn did, and even some of the
Jedi Academy. That's Do you mean Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy, or do you mean the Thrawn trilogy?
Oh, sorry, I meant Thrawn trilogy.
Okay.
Jedi Academy trilogy is also good.
It is
too.
pretty
I
good,
enjoyed
yeah.
that. But then also Timothy Zahn did a duology, the
Oh yeah, Spectre of the Past,
Past
Vision
and
of the Future. Mhm.
Yeah, both of those were really good.
Pretty
But
solid.
Again,
Yep.
focusing on Thrawn.
Yes.
Which was very interesting. I
I
enjoyed
have
that.
not liked the modern Thrawn stuff. I tried so hard.
I haven't even read some of it,
Yeah,
to
I
be
don't
honest.
know.
And part of me was like, I don't know if I can do
Yeah.
it, to be honest. Did you read the Clone Wars series that Karen Traviss was writing?
I read Hard Contact.
Okay.
That's the only one that I read, but I absolutely loved it.
It
I
was
always
really
intended
good.
to read more.
Yeah, the rest of them are really good. I felt kind of badly for her just because it was during that time period that Disney had taken over, and
Oh.
essentially they were like, shut it down.
You're done. Mm,
Yeah.
that's
So she
rough.
had to try and figure out, how am I going to wrap this up?
Yeah.
When in reality, she had so much more content that she
Yeah.
was going to try and work with.
Yeah.
So, and that was hard. And it was cool too because it did add elements of Republic Commando.
Mm-hmm.
And having played the game when I was growing
I
up.
love that game.
Oh, such a
yeah,
fabulous
it's very
game.
good. I only played that recently, actually.
Oh, it's such a
Very
good game.
good. Yeah,
and
it
they
is.
ended it on such a cliffhanger. You're like,
I
what
know.
happens? What
Yeah,
happens?
yeah.
And they've never done anything with it since.
Yeah.
So I would be very hopeful if it would be very lovely if Disney did a follow-up
Yeah.
and did it well.
Yeah. You know what? I also finished the new Star Wars game. And last time we were...
Ooh, I have been playing.
What
I
is
have
that
not
called?
finished it.
What is it called?
Fallen Order.
Yes, Fallen Order.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so I also finished Fallen Order since we last spoke, and I still have some criticisms of the game. It still sort of feels like an old style game to me in a lot of ways. A lot of repetitiveness with maps. I found
Oh,
myself
yeah.
like going back to the same planet, and the
Yes.
mission was different, but it's like I don't want to walk through this again.
Kind of like KOTOR, a little bit, or some elements of it, but
Yeah.
more in depth.
Okay.
Almost.
So, but I ended up really enjoying it. That's the
I
that's
haven't
the silver
finished the
lining
game.
there.
I've been playing the game through to a degree, and you're right. It does have a lot of elements of just continually going back to similar
Yes, like,
planets.
I don't want to be here again.
And it's sort of like, in some ways, like a Lara Croft game. I don't know if you played any
Yes,
of those.
yeah.
Where you have to master your climbing skills, and you have to kind of think through, okay, how am I going to do this? And to be honest, some of my brothers hated those games
Yeah.
because they were like, look, you do the same jump. I did that jump, and she didn't grab the ledge
Yeah, I
and
know.
fell to her death.
Well, that's definitely true. And I had just finished not just, but in the past couple of years, played through all of the Uncharted games, and I
Oh,
couldn't
yeah.
help but see that
Oh, it's like
comparison as
parallels.
well. And it was like not as good as far as like the climbing and some of the way you interact with the
Oh,
levels. And so
okay.
that was a hard comparison to make.
That's unfortunate.
Yep. There's a graphic novel called Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order Dark Temple.
Oh yeah,
By Matthew Rosenberg.
I've seen the book and I've looked at it limitedly. Like I haven't read it through thoroughly, but
It gives you a little bit of background on the world, but it's not one where if you don't play the game, you'd be lost. It has some characters in common and kind of sets up like this is where things are at the moment, but that works as a standalone very well. But yes, I did enjoy that game, and I'm looking forward to whatever comes next game-wise.
yeah,
Yeah.
that will be good.
All right, well, Light of the Jedi was maybe a thumbs down.
Yeah,
The
not the best.
Right, yeah,
but
but
hopeful for the second.
that's right. Our graphic novel we liked a little bit better. So you can check both of those out. The graphic novels, Forever Crimson, the book Light of the Jedi. We have both right here in the collection. You can come check it out. You can also go to soundcloud.com/allthebooks for all of our old episodes, but also we have a special Star Wars playlist that includes Amanda's previous guest spots, as well as our interviews with authors like Alan Dean Foster, Justina Ireland, and many others. So go check that out over at SoundCloud or anywhere you get your podcasts. Amanda, as always, thanks for joining me.
No problem. Thank you.
I'll see you next Star Wars Day.
Next Star Wars.
And,
Day.
every other day. 'Cause
yeah,
we
sure.
work together regularly. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of How's Things. On the next regular episode, Sally Jacoby Murphy's going to be here, and we're talking Ta-Nehisi Coates. And then after that, a new special interview with author Tess Gerritsen. So stick around for those. We'll see you then.